Hello, everyone, and welcome to Track 2 of the conference Future of Schools, Overcoming the COVID-19 Challenge and Beyond. Coming to Track 2, the theme of this track is Adaptive Leadership. Our very first panel will discuss adapting to a COVID world, reopening schools and impact on the school ecosystem. This discussion will be moderated by Mr. Ganesh Kohli. As you know, he's a renowned teacher and counselor who has founded, nurtured, and led several education-focused initiatives for the last 2.5 decades. In 2016, Ganesh founded the IC3 movement to impact close to 175,000 high schools over 15 years. With 300 plus volunteers, Ganesh has built a platform that is providing the much needed focus on college and career counseling within schools. Today, the IC3 movement attracts leaders from close to 1,500 universities, 4,000 schools across 320 cities and 42 countries. These leaders support free education for school teachers to train them to become effective as college and career counselors. Before I hand over to Ganesh, I'd just like to mention that in case of any questions that you have, please feel free to post them in the Q&A box in the Zoom panel. Hope you enjoy the session. Over to you, Ganesh.
Thank you so much, Gitanjali, and a very warm welcome and namaste to all of our friends who've joined us here today. Firstly, I have to say I was fascinated by the opening keynote by Honorable Secretary Education, Mrs. Anita Karwal, and I was so heartened to see that just like we intend to do with this session, there were so many solutions that were provided. And I also wanted to just congratulate Ashoka University for putting together this conference at a time when all of us are struggling to find answers. So thank you very much for having us here. With me today on this panel are three very eminent educators. Really, these are teachers at heart, and they've really put together some great solutions for all of us during this time. Vanita, Mrs. Vanita Uppal, OBE, is an international educator for 30 years. Ms. Uppal is the director of the British School, New Delhi. She is the proud recipient of the Order of the British Empire in recognition for her services to British education in an international context, and is the only Indian serving principal to receive this honor. She has been a recipient of the Woman Achiever of the Year Award in 2009. Her mantra is to serve to make a difference, and her educational philosophy is focused on encouraging innovation, honoring rich traditions, trusting in the power of collaboration, and leading with integrity and compassion. So welcome to Ms. Uppal. Also with me on this panel is Shashi Banerjee. Mrs. Shashi Banerjee is an educator for the last 33 years, is the principal of Shiv Nadar School in Noida. She was part of the founding team that conceptualized and built Shiv Nadar School from scratch in the year 2011. Over the years, she has represented India as an educational leader on various delegations in the US, UK, France, Australia, and Finland. She believes in being a part of a community of learners who do not teach, but learn and nurture learners who seek and construct learning. And finally, we also have from Raipur in Chhattisgarh, Shiladitya Ghosh, who's the director principal at NH Goel World School in Raipur. His previous assignments, he worked as Director of Curriculum and Training at the Shiv Nadar Foundation Rural Initiatives Vidya Gyan Academies, as Regional Manager at Exceed, and as Vice Principal at Shriram School in Gurgaon. Shil, like all the others on this panel, is a passionate teacher, and he loves the conversations inside the classroom. I just want to share. Sorry, I can see Gitanjali, you're unmuted. Is there?
Yes, Ganesh, sorry to interject. So I think Vanita ma'am is having a slight problem getting in. So she will join us shortly. You can kick off the discussion.
Sure. You know, I started teaching in 97, and one of the things that really bothered me as I was teaching was that I would go to an evening social event, and a doctor would come along and everybody would stand up and salute the doctor. The pilot would come along and everybody would salute the pilot. The accountant and the engineer would get all the attention. And when people ask me, what do you do? I said I teach. And most people would say in Hindi, acha padhate ho, kahan padhate ho? Almost disdainful. In this, most of us don't remember a doctor we visited when we were in 8th grade or 9th grade, but we remember a teacher that we met in 8th grade or 9th grade. And I'd like to believe that all of us who are attending this session today really are soul doctors, not to be forgotten in 2 days, but to be remembered for 60 or 70 years. So really, this COVID crisis has really brought the soul doctors together through this platform. And we really need to know what we have to do collectively as a community to help young people. So often all of you are sitting in a chair in your homes, and I hope you junked some chairs in the last 8 weeks, because we had so many chairs called I Know. And these were such dangerous chairs that we were sitting on. And we've been compelled to call the kabadi, as we call him, or the junk man, and junk those chairs called I Know. Because now we are compelled to sit on a chair called I Don't Know or I Want to Know. And our session's also really about exploring. There is no astrology here. We're just exploring and helping find solutions. For the last 2 decades, actually, a lot of industry folks and university folks have kept talking about schools having to be relevant. In the midst of the Industrial Revolution, everything around us was changing. The way taxis were run, the way all the automation. And we were constantly being told, look, you have to change. Schools cannot continue to be a combination of the legacy that we were formed from, the military, the prison, and the place of worship. Wearing the uniforms like the military, sitting in rooms strapped for 1 hour at a time, just like in a prison. With exactly those small windows to keep an eye on all the prisoners in a school. And then, of course, we rang the bell like places of worship to disperse people. We really have come a long way from that time where, schools were that. We've been pushed to change, and we've been fairly slow so far. This is really an opportunity for us to dramatically alter where we are. This particular period in our time was anyways encouraging us to move away from memorization, from repetition, and from rigid instructions. Those are 3 things that machines do better. We were being compelled to use our neocortex or the frontal lobe or the thinking brain, which is 40% of our brain. And that's really what sets human beings apart. So I'm really encouraged by the fact that we are going to be able to create our own reality from here on. We are really exploring solutions, and we are now in what I'd like to believe is the quantum model of reality. Newtonian physics talked a great deal about matter and about some of the things that we often relate to even now. But we had energy come through with Einstein, and we now have quantum physics talking about consciousness and the observer effect. So the way we perceive this situation, this COVID era, is really going to define the reality that we are going to walk into. We create our own realities, and this is not a session about falling victim to the circumstances. We'd really like to come out and create a new reality. And the question is, are we going to react to this situation or are we going to act? Our message really is, let's take action, but not be reactive. This is not about a reaction, but about action. And really, not about just altering or making some incremental changes. This is really about altering the fundamentals and recreating. So that's really what our focus today as well. And many solutions as I hand over, and I'm making sure that Vanita has been able to join us. But as we really have to ask ourselves a fundamental question: are we listening to COVID? COVID is trying to tell us something as educators. Are we listening? Is our ear there with COVID? And really, there are a lot of challenges, but if we have 1 hour, are we going to spend 50 minutes talking about the problem and marinate in the problem and then only have 10 minutes for solution? The reality is South Korea opened the schools, and on 29th of May 500 schools in South Korea had to close down, but they're constantly working on solutions. Yes, there are challenges that are going to come. I spoke to a friend in the UK who told me that, look, my daughter's school has created pods with 16 children, and 16 children work as a unit, and they don't interact with the other children in school, but them and their teachers work together. These are younger children. And if there was someone to fall sick, only that pod will stop coming to school. You would have the rest of the school functioning. Now that's really innovative, and there's a lot of mechanisms that they put. So we look at solutions like that. Or the idea of community schooling. All the parents are working. They cannot, just leave their work and stay at home. How about 10, 15, 20 children being put together in a single house and being monitored by one parent? So parents only have to take 1 day off. So there are so many such solutions, and you'll hear many more. So with that, I'm going to request Shiv to get the presentation on. And I think we're ready for our first speaker today. Vanita, welcome. You've been introduced, and you'd like to go right at the beginning of the first slide, Shiv. All right. Yes, that's Vanita's
right.
slide. Wonderful.
Yes, Ganesh, I'm on. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you and hear you. We're all good.
Brilliant. Apologies, there was some technical crisis. Right. Thank you, Ganesh, for your are you ready for me to start, Ganesh?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, Ganesh, thank you very much for the very kind introduction, which I managed to hear a bit of, for inviting me on this panel, and of course, along with distinguished colleagues. Thank you to you and to Ashoka University. So before I start sharing the experience of our school, that is the British school, over the last few months, I would like to set the context, which I think is critical. Because when we share our collective wisdom and experience, we must know that similar principles can be equally relevant and successfully implemented, provided they are contextualized to a specific reality. So what is the context of the British school? We are located in the heart of diplomatic Delhi. We are a school with about 1,250 students and aged 3 to 18, and we are second home to students from 70 nationalities. Now, the school's response to the pandemic principle was research and evidence-based decision-making, which was consultative and collaborative through a single command center, for want of a better word, our crisis management team. If you don't have one, please create one and give it adequate muscle and training. The third core principle was open, timely, and transparent communication. Uncertain times breed fear and anxiety. Assurance, trust, and confidence building becomes the moral imperative of leadership to provide. This helped us in strengthening an already very strong homeschool partnership. Principle number 4. Student learning and well-being could not be compromised. It had to be engaging, purposeful, and quality assured. We were prepared, but did we have to tweak and enhance? Oh, yes, we did. Did we improve? Oh, yes, we did. The critical point here is that these same principles that apply to our escalation matrix will now apply to a de-escalation matrix. What are the implications? adaptive pedagogy, focus on the unwritten curriculum, human resource policies. Going forward in opening and responding and are looking at our re-entry plans. The next bit, human capital. Schools are about people first. The crisis has shown what somebody might not have tried to wanted to believe, that there is nothing more important than people. And amongst the people, students obviously continue to be the nucleus. Sir John Jones once said,
Vanita, your voice is really cracking up quite a bit. We can, Vanita, we can barely hear you because you're cracking up.
Sorry?
We can barely hear you. You are cracking up quite extensively. So
okay,
maybe you can try switching off your video and speak through.
Okay, sure. Will do. Okay, is this better, Ganesh?
Yeah, let's see you try this, please.
Okay, so what was the last thing I said? Okay, that's a question for you. Okay, so teachers, again, in the words of Sir John Jones, as I said, are at this point, not only were they planting seeds and igniting passion, I think teachers were the harbinger of normalcy. They were the harbingers of faith, hope, and reassurance to students and families who were watching them on their screens, don't forget, and giving them that sense of normalcy in this uncertain time. School leaders, moral purpose here, school leaders. And this is a crisis that has brought that to the fore more than anything else. Leaders are here to provide meaning. They are to plan in advance. They need to be bold, be clear, be agile. A lesson I learned, which I already believed, 3 teams. Look after the people who are looking after your young ones who are in your care. Don't forget them. They are your COVID leaders. Parents, critical part. Schools, homes, that line has been blurred now. Parents are your strongest partners, your collaborators. Keep your lines of communication open. Continue to give and receive feedback. Focus on people is the key takeaway from this point. The last bit I wanted to talk about was future proofing. We've done that. So there is definitely a need to look at teacher training, to look at public-private partnerships, to look at instructional design. Let's focus on integrating technology no longer just as a tool or as an aid, but as a medium to maximize engagement, progress, and collaboration, which gets me to my last point, which is on collaboration. I know right now the word that's doing the round is isolate, isolation ward, self-isolate, quarantine, but sharing best practices and collaborating and not competing is the need of the hour. Let's connect the dots, build a synergy between current learnings and future aspirations. Let's not let this huge crisis go to waste. There is a lot that will change. There will be a lot that we will need to reimagine and rethink. But I just want to leave you with one last final thought. What shouldn't change? What shouldn't change is our focus to do what is in the best interest of the children in our care. Let's empower them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you, Ganesh.
Thank you. Excellent. Shashi ma'am, I'm going to bring you in, and Shil, there are tons of questions pouring in, and we're going to have to be really nimble with our slide shifting, with our pieces, so that we can take a lot of these questions. I think all of us have a lot of talking to do, but with questions. So Shashi ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Ganesh, and thank you, Vanita, for that solid foundation and the tribute that you paid to another set of essential workers called the teachers. And I take it on from there. And for some reason, Ganesh and all the viewers here, a very good evening to all of you and a warm welcome, because never before have educators from the world over come together, congregated to solve one single problem, whether they run a school under a tin shed or one of the most opulent schools in the world, the most able, digitally well-resourced school, to a village school under a tree. So we are all together in this, and that is what makes me really happy that we're learning so much, even while you invite us to talk about these things. You know, what comes to my mind is about combating COVID, just as Gandhiji's Satyagraha. You know, it requires strengthening and awakening and engaging of the head, heart, and hand. And for some reason, I feel the serenity prayer to start with, where whichever power you believe in, that power needs to give you the serenity to accept what you cannot change. And Vanita spoke about it. The courage to change what you can. And that's why we're all pooling our ideas together, our case studies to share, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's where I think leadership, call it adaptability, call it sensible, resilient leadership, but we ought to make the difference between flippancy and adaptability, because as Ganesh, you very beautifully set the context with how what we've now, it's become a cliche, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, uncertain, and all of that, and complex. But never before has the teaching community looked at resetting the vocabulary of don't share, stay away. Look at the littlest ones. They have to be told, keep your things to yourself, don't share with anyone. And I think in all of this for the past 2.5 months, we are all trying to gauge the nature of the beast. And I think those who've been prudent and have not jumped into reaction, as you rightly put, and have had the prudence to understand, but to take candid, courageous, and compassionate decisions and communicate accordingly, I think that is the message that we've been receiving from those who have been holding the fort. Talking about what happened when COVID struck, and I think as a case study from the school, the Shiv Nadar school being almost one of the newest kids on the block, we've just had about 8-9 years where we've tried to build a school which looked at diversity in a manner where learning becomes the central key theme. And we've had this opportunity to think differently. And the aim, I think, across all schools, any home, is to keep children in a space where they continue to learn. You know, learning is a living organism's vital right. And if that learning goes haywire, they will learn, but they will learn things that might cause harm, not just biologically, but also in all of the forms of the social, emotional, and ethical well-being of society. So quickly, I'd like to share that the first thing that happened within our school as a case study was to shut school immediately when we heard about the largeness of the emergency, which first seemed like only touching other countries, but soon came into our own courtyard in our country. It came under a bit of a scanner, because why did you close without there being a directive? But I thought we all needed to understand what to do, because safeguarding children was a priority. Safeguarding carers was a priority. And gradually, as things unfolded, March was an assessment time. I think the world over, all international boards gradually within the first few weeks talked about postponing and then curtailing and then doing away with assessments. I think the CBSE was also trying to see what best. So there were different contexts where people could have done different things. Online assessments for middle and senior school, for those schools where you already had the foresight to establish robust digital platforms, where you had the tools for teachers to navigate learning and for children to own and become self-reliant. But there was a question even in our school, we have diverse learners. There are about 100 children who come from the villages nearby. Do they have the wherewithal? They would be given things in school, but at home. So the first things we had to do was establish response teams. I call them the response teams because those were well-being teams, technology upgradation teams. Again, as Vanita was sharing, you have to first see where your learners are. And that's what we went doing. We have to see where the parents are, where the teachers are. So my first sharing with everyone on what needs to be done now, we are all together in it, but communication, candid, courageous, honest, and compassionate, along with action, which is parallelly observing, listening, as Ganesh said, seeing what the situation demands. And that's why the most important thing is to remain connected. Now, while in most schools such as ours, connectivity will not be such a big problem, that's another issue where the equity and how this, for those learners who barely have a normal mobile phone, and I'm sure this will be discussed further. So what does connected learning mean? Connected learning does not really mean sitting in front of the screen for hours on end. And you'll be surprised that the most aware of parents also, because they needed to work from home, would not hesitate in letting their children connect on screen for many, many more hours than they would initially raise their arms in alarm. Even for a 9-year-old to be on screen for 2.5 hours was alarming. But today, such is the state in which even parents find themselves that they feel it's easier to let the child, because you see, school is not just a place where children learn, it is a place which supports society for all its economic activities. So that's a very large area we need to keep in mind and design accordingly. Connected learning also means to connect with teacher groups, parent groups, to see their well-being. There are children who are ready to step into the real world, done the grade 12, those coming into grade 11. The career guidance cell has been overactive, literally trying to reach out to people. So it's not just in isolation, there has been connected conversations, and we had to modify the academic learning goals to see that a little bit of music, art, theater, conversations, and we had to establish portals of sports, conversations, debating. The Senior Student Council took up the act of community service. The school went out into the villages, looked at where there was no food on the table. So to sum it all up, I think this is a great opportunity for us to see what we can do during these times rather than lamenting what we can't. I think the kind of tough times bring out the best in us. And here, if you see, looking for the best video conferencing tools, looking at those children who don't have any device, how do you reach out to them? Teachers have been dedicating one-on-one sessions through whatever means they could. These will need solutions beyond just technology, beyond just connecting. They will need solutions that stem from the ground, that stems from where societies and communities thrive. Different pathways have been connected towards communicating with different stakeholders. Partnership with parents in storytelling. Parents have so many talents. People around the school have so many talents. Those partnerships have come to the fore. Processes, policies, and protocols are now being gradually revisited. You cannot have the same protocols, you can't have the same policies, the processes. So I think it's pretty much like reinventing a school. And I think if it is seen in that nature, a lot will come out of synchronous, asynchronous learning, where partnerships are not just among teachers, it's students, parents, teachers, and many other members of society. So I just hand it over to you with just one last bit. Let well-being be at the center of everything right now. Learning will happen. Children learn because they adapt, they respond, and they take on the challenge of the present times. And that's where we need to let go. Creating a safeguarding environment, creating a little bit of safety net in which everyone operates. I will come back when you have more questions. I hand you over.
Great, thank you. And I've been looking through the questions that are coming through, and there are a lot of questions around under-resourced schools. And I'm going to ask, and I want to take a lot of your questions. So Shil, you're going to have to do a 5-minute magic for me, like
Maybe.
5 minutes. And really Shil's focus, and you can move on to your first slide, Shil, is going to be on under-resourced schools. And he's worked and been doing a lot of research in those pockets. So go ahead, Shil. You have your 5 minutes starting now.
Yes, of course. Very quickly, I think this is the Indian reality where we always talk about technology enables education today in the 21st century, but there is another reality, the other end of the spectrum, where you can see on the slide right now that very few children actually maybe are connected through WhatsApp. So what has been happening in the country all around? I think Ganesh mentioned soul doctors. They are not just soul doctors. They were on foot. They were on the phone trying to connect to the last child about what they are doing and what they are not able to do. I think it's about the teachers connecting with the child with whatever means they had. And you have examples from West Bengal, remote areas, 200 kilometers away from Kolkata, where the teacher was trying to, for the first time, list down the numbers of the children, because before that, they never thought that they will ever talk to them over the phone. There are children being contacted in the slums of Mumbai because they were lost, because the parents had taken them away homes and they did not know where they were. Till the time when some rationing was supposed to be given to them, the child was traced and the teacher was able to talk to them and figure out what is it that they are doing and how can they still keep in touch with them. What are the devices that they have and what they don't have. There are various kinds of solutions that came across to me while I was talking to people, teachers across the country. Pasting of worksheets on public notice boards. You cannot imagine, this is something which is obviously nothing to do with technology. You just need to know that you can go and paste something where the children can come and see what is the next kind of task that they need to be doing. They found out in every small community, they found out who has a smartphone through whom they can access the material that the teachers were making very short videos, some content, and sending it across so that it can be disseminated to the children across in that area. This constant calling of teachers and the students calling back their teachers is something that went on and on. But I think the shift that we have to make right now is twofold. One, that the institutions have to come together as a unit to reach out to all its students. It cannot anymore rely on individual effort of teachers. The population of the school going population is huge. And we are obviously short-staffed in terms of the number of teachers that are available in this country for this strata of society. And therefore, schools have to come together. And that is a difficult proposition, but still then the leadership of the teachers and the school leadership, what they are, I mean, the principals and the coordinators, whoever it is, they have to line up the students and talk to them. But then before we do that, there is an interesting anecdote that I found from a school in Noida, where an NGO, when they first time went to the children's homes and wanting to get them back to school through any means, what did they find? The first need was food. And the school turned itself into a place from where they can provide food, and learning came later. So there are as many solutions, as many places. Going forward, the community has to be much more active. It goes back to what those African sayings are, that it takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole village to educate a child. So therefore, the role of community volunteers who can probably devise, innovate on material the moment the children come back in either short or smaller groups or in shifts, so that they can cover up for what they have lost. So net, I think solutions, non-tech solutions, are the ones which will be the base on which we can actually disseminate education or learning to the larger masses of students in the country who are still in need of that. Not to say that there are many schools which were just shut down and nothing happened there. So as educators, we need to come together to figure out that besides the solutions that we just now talked about, what are the various things that we can do in the coming year? I think, Ganesh, we should take on questions rather than carry
Yes.
on like this. That will make this
Yes.
conversation more interesting.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Ganesh.
Thank you, Shil. And I think there are some very, very practical questions here. Um, and uh, uh, and I'm going to begin with some of the questions. Shil, you can move on to the last slide. But the first one, what can happen if for an entire year the students take a drop or they can't make it to school? Will learning end or will it begin? I think that's a wonderful question. Uh, you want to give that a shot, Vanita? Let's see if your audio is well. And if all of us can keep our answers, really, there are almost 100+ questions here. So I really want to see all of our answers be like as crisp and as short, so we can keep it to less than a minute. All of our answers. Over to you, Vanita.
Okay, I think the first thing is to understand what learning is. When everybody was talking about school closing, the point I make, school never closed. The connection didn't stop. We were continuing to reach out. Learning is not just content. One was reading a lot of posts about students will be left behind. But I think students are actually moving ahead. Look at the things they've learned along the way. They've learned how to deal with dramatic change. They've learned how to be empathetic. They've learned how to adapt. They've learned how to be agile and be respectful of others. They've seen the suffering of others, and this will only make them more compassionate. So I don't think learning, I think it's a very broad-based definition. Yes, learning for exams might take a back seat, but that only if we don't do what Shil is saying and we don't do what we've been talking about, is keeping that at the center of all our engagement. We cannot keep schools closed forever, Ganesh, because schools, as Shashi also pointed out, are not just places where you come to learn. That you can do on Google. You can do that on a text, right? But what the school is giving you is valuable human interaction, those skills that will stand you in good stead as a citizen, as a global citizen. So in terms of learning, it's up to us, the families, the communities, the schools, the educators, to understand that what does learning really mean for a young child, for a 3-year-old or for a 10-year-old. And I don't think that should or will be pushed behind. We are too committed to the cause of our children. We won't let that get pushed behind.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that perspective. So learning really didn't stop. And this is going to be more, students are still imbibing the skills, the values, they're learning with everything that's going around them. That's the larger message. It doesn't have to be just preparation for the exam, which is what we've always been focused on. So thank you for sharing that. There's another question. Maybe Shashi ma'am, you can take this on. With schools that have large groups of students, how do we handle with social distancing? Should there be an entirely different timetable?
Absolutely. I think the timetable is one of those set of wheels on which the schools move. So it offers a basis for staffing, scheduling, and some kind of a routine. But prudence would be not to let the timetable govern routines, but to offer a structure to reduce virtual contact time and hand over learning more to those students who probably have the entire home environment. And this is for as long as there is this dread and as long as it's not a safe place, because whatever will be done in a staggered way. We've also thought of a few things, listening to the International School of Geneva and the schools in Israel and the MHRD and the McKinsey report, the WHO report. I think schools will have to look at option A, option B, option C. There will be some in the areas of confinement. Most students are not even staying in the same city. They've gone back, some to the villages, some to other cities. And they're not traveling in the near future very quickly. So there will be maybe 25% who will need to be in school probably. There will be children of essential workers, people who do not have the devices, and people who are ready to let the children in. The pods that you were talking about is something that everyone is talking about. You have to create separate entry points, exit points. But the only thing is, you have to look at the trade-off with learning. Is it worth doing all of this, establishing mobile sanitization units, having different entry points, exit points, letting 25% come in and live streaming the other, the sessions for those who are at home? We will have to very, very closely examine how much of teaching learning is this really going to make possible? And is the trade-off worth it? Because if you look at the news streaming in from many parts of the world, people who've opened are going back, closing. So there will be, and we are using the design thinking module of creating prototypes first, checking it out, and only then we'll be able to create those models for the future. But timetabling will be an essential foundational structure on which to build it upon.
Great. So in summary, you're really, social distancing with large numbers is going to be a challenge. What you're talking about is prioritizing those children who have the greatest needs, those that do not have the resources, and also having new different timetables. Students will work in much smaller groups than they've been able to. But then that brings us the question on whether this is even physically possible with the current number of teachers we have, with the current resources, with the current size of school, with the current classrooms. Shil, do you see us even being able to implement a timetable which is completely different with the current resources?
See, I think there are two parts to it. One is that nobody talked about content. There is a content that is available and which will be probably reduced or modified or whatever. So one has to take care of that one. And the second thing is that, look, as Shashi ma'am said, who needs it more? What are the various support systems that we have around the school which will help us continue with the education and the learning of the children? See, I don't think that if we miss out on something in this year, particularly, that we're going to miss out for life. What we need to focus on are the skills. What we need to focus on are what is it that I will be assessed on, which will obviously cannot be content anymore. But for example, problem solving. Can we look at a different system of evaluation? Can we look at different? So managing time, managing the physical possibilities of meeting, and managing resources that is available. The balance between all the three is very important to be able to go ahead in the future and figure out what is the best that we can do as an institution. I think the schools will need to really figure that out.
Great. Thanks, Shil. I'm going to keep going because there are so many questions and I want to try and get through as many of these questions as possible before we close this session. How do you focus on inclusion and online learning, especially for physically and mentally challenged kids? How can we keep students who are, so-called, and I don't like this expression in the question, but I'm going to use it, below average students focused during online classes as they pay very less attention during the physical classes?
Can I take that quickly?
Yes.
So in our department, very, very, very crisply, there is a routine that was followed, but not just with the kids, but also with the parents. So the day began with yoga, the day began with certain physical exercises, and then getting on to conversations with the children, with the parents, and then a little bit of things that what they can do at home. And in some places, I think that having a pet inside the home helped very well. So that was just my observation on how we dealt with the children who are with learning disabilities or learning difficulties.
Would you like me to come in, Ganesh, on this, or do you have another question?
I'm ready with the next one, but you can take 30 seconds on this one. No, you can take 30 seconds. This is important.
I think one of the things that we do know that children with any learning difficulties, OCD, or any other area, they need that one-on-one interaction. And schools which could, like us, we developed that there was a one-on-one interaction on a daily basis, because for them, these regular prescribed routines don't work. So where possible, that one-on-one connect with the teacher continues to remain critical.
Yeah, I just want to point out in response to a comment that I'm reviewing, online education is not the solution. All of us have realized, all those who wanted to work from home, they do not any longer want to work from home. Every one of us realizes that. So under no way, in no way is this panel suggesting that this is going to substitute the need for schools, but we're really exploring solutions for the current situation, and trying to wash out some of those inefficiencies in our approach, some of the primitiveness in our approach, in the way that we were being repetitive, in the way that we were being very monotonous and rote in the way that things were happening. I have another very interesting question. How can we promote peer learning and peer interaction during online teaching and learning? Shashi ma'am, if you have some ideas on that one, peer learning during online sessions, how do you promote that?
So this links it also to the previous question of timetabling, because a lot of time has got released due to the asynchronous learning, where children have taken on learning groups. There are cohorts where reading, writing, storytelling, also community projects, fundraising. Children have got together to build websites to raise awareness with regard to who needs help and who are helping, and offer gratitude. So I think this is, like I said, we have to see what these times have given us or strengthened us to do better. Peer learning has come out to be one of the strongest areas, where small groups with little facilitation, and also for those children who find it difficult to concentrate, somehow we don't always need screens. There has been a one-on-one and small group learning. Peer learning has really facilitated those who found it difficult in a normal classroom scenario to be able to concentrate on their learning. So I think a lot of time has got released. There is no commuting. So people are moving from one room to the other in a fraction of a few, let's say, minutes, not seconds. And that has released a lot of time for children. And I think schools will never be the same in aspects of the meeting monsters and confluences and decision-making, brainstorming sessions, even for students. In that area, I think more time has got released. So I really see children, they have created dormitories of learning for themselves now. But again, as Sheil had brought out, we cannot only rely on technology doing it. There have to be real community groups who are real-time facilitators, and we have to balance that. Thank you.
I as we begin to run out of time, I just want to take one last question, and then we can begin to summarize. And this question was about parents. How do we engage the parents? I mean, you've all talked about the need to really get the teachers equipped, to care about the teachers, etc. Some of these parents are under very high levels of stress. And I know always the ones that get painted in black color are the parents so many times, because, they are not being cooperative, etc. But many of these parents are going through emotional stress, financial stress, and many of them are just not having the resources to be supportive in this period. So maybe, Vanita, you can give a comment on this. How do you
Absolutely
kind of help parents? And then a quick one from Shil, 30 seconds each, and then we'll come to the end.
I think these things are not done at a time of an event. This is a process. So if there is a long-standing partnership between students and parents and school, that is when you're all on the same hymn page. You're all singing from the same hymn song. Yes, these are difficult times. And one of the things that we did at our school, that our outreach to parents was as much as for students. So we were running well-being sessions for families as well, speaking a lot to parents, creating opportunities for feedback. And the bottom line is, that all that when people are under stress, all that at times they need is a voice, is somebody to kind of speak about their stress. Remember, parents, and this was my point about reopening schools as well, and there is just a perspective on that. Parents who are under financial stress, economic stress, in our country, in our context, Ganesh, most child rearing is usually left to the mom, right? So if we continue to keep schools closed, what's going to suffer is women in the workforce. Because how will the youngest toddler be taught at home online if there is no adult there? So I think this is a community, a concerted effort. No one can do this alone. Parents and schools have to reach out to each other and work together on this. And that is one of the reasons why you really need to try and get a semblance of normalcy for everybody. And we have a moral duty to do that as educators.
Great. Thank you, Shil. Your 30 seconds, and then we'll go to close this. I want to be on time
I think
for the next session. Yes.
The only way forward is to talk. Talk your heart out and listen without any judgment.
Correct.
Without any prejudice. Because we as teachers, we are the, as you said, soul doctors, and we have to reach out to them. We have to take care of ourselves. As school leaders, we have to take care of our faculties. But then we together have to create a kind of a game plan about, almost a game plan about how do we reach out to the parent and listen to them. Listening is the only way which can just let them out of what they're going through, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And at the end, it will be okay. We will all survive. We will all be much, much happier later on in lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
this too shall pass.
Yes, this too shall pass. I second
yes,
that.
and I think you're using the Buddha's words. This too shall pass.
Yes.
And then there was another one that I really liked, which is Chareveti, Chareveti. Keep walking, keep walking. I think I just wanted to acknowledge that we are at a point where hopefully the world will wake up to how precious the teacher is. This teacher who has been largely not given credit, that was, brushed aside as, anybody who could not do anything else will get into teaching, etc. Teachers are the most important factors in our world today, and our entire generation is now dependent on the teachers. So I really hope that this crisis will elevate the role of teachers in society, and each one of us attending this session is incredibly important. We're shaping. I also heard through this session a lot of hope, a lot of opportunity. This is not by any means a doomsday phenomena. This is an opportunity for schools that have been high on inertia, that haven't been changing things. This is an opportunity which has come to shake things up. It's an opportunity, learning can happen through television and radio. I heard about all the initiatives that Honorable Secretary Education was talking about earlier. There is so much. Learning can happen through charts put on street corners. And right now, if you told any student that you are not in school, well, you are sitting in a physics lab. How do you say you're not in school? He said, but how am I sitting in a physics lab? I'm sitting at home. Well, you know what? There is gravity at play where you are sitting, and there is acoustics at play, and sound waves are going in out of your mouth and bouncing off the walls and coming back into your ears. And some of us are wearing concave and convex lenses, and there is so much magic all around. There is a Harry Potter effect of learning, which we can bring to life today. So what I've heard is a lot of hope. COVID or no COVID, learning hasn't stopped. Learning will not stop. And it is about us being nimble, us throwing away the chair called I know, sitting constantly on a chair called I don't know or I want to know. And as we attend these sessions over the next 2 days, we're really, really equipping ourselves to go back on Monday morning and take some action. Why waste the day today worrying about tomorrow? Let's use the day today to do something that can change tomorrow. So I think I realized in the first 3 weeks of this crisis that a lot of my time was wasted worrying about what will happen. And quickly then realized that it's important to embrace the present moment. With that, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists, Vanita, Uppal ma'am, Shashi Banerjee ma'am, Shiv, Shiladitya, Ghosh. These are wonderful teachers. Actually, they're all teachers and a great combination of head and heart. That's how we chose this panel. And I also want to express my gratitude to the entire team at Ashoka. They've really worked hard to put this together. Every technician at the back end, everybody who's trying to get it right, it's like a big wedding doing a conference. There's a lot of unhappy people generally. So please forgive all the people who ever organized a wedding in their life or are involved in a conference. Know that little things are all pardonable. I wish you a great 2 days at the conference, and I look forward, hopefully, to interacting with some of you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.